Alright, so we're going to finalize the neck here today. And you saw me drill the end dots in the last video. And we're going to put a 3/4 bit in my router table. And we're going to start the carve on the neck with a 3/4 bit. It's going to help give me a consistent carve going down the neck. So we'll run both sides through this. We'll clamp it down after I originally run it. You want to make sure that you clamp the neck after you're doing a major amount of wood removal, or it's going to move. So that's why I've got this clamp to my 12-degree radius caul. That way, every time I do a little bit of work, I clamp this back and make sure it doesn't move. So I file a little bit of the neck off, and then I'm going to take this over to my drum sander here, spindle sander, and we're going to go back and forth and get the edges at the heel and at the top of the neck. So I've got about an 80 grit sleeve on here. We're going to go back and forth and get this nice and cleaned up. So I get a nice consistent carve doing it this way. These rigid tools from Home Depot are really helpful. I actually have two of these, one for the belt sander, one for the spindle sander. Perfect size for Luthier work. So I cut a piece of sandpaper for the belt sander and use it to clean up the profile. This long piece of sandpaper will give me a clean sand. So any nicks or any spots where I went a little bit too deep on the spindle sander, the sandpaper helps line everything up. So then I get a 120 grit sandpaper, cut that down the seam, and sand it as well. So I got my vacuum cleaner attachment sitting on the bottom there, picking up any of the dust. And I'll go back and forth with the different grit sandpaper and help clean up the heel, clean up the top of the neck. Pretty smooth process to get it all cleaned up. So then we'll come out and take my palm sander and clean up the neck. You do not want to take a orbital sander to the neck at this point. It'll dig in. This is a 150 grit piece of sandpaper, and the palm sander is very light sanding. I'm taking the orbital sander to the headstock just to make sure it's nice and smooth. I'll take it on the back side. Make sure the headstock's nice and level, and then I'll just do that for the sanding lines on the base. So I'll come back with a hand sander and do a hand sander, and we'll progressively move up in grits here. And we'll take this all the way to 320, make sure we get all the sanding lines out. So at this point the neck is pretty close to being done, getting ready for the stain. I'll clean out the frets here once more. So I'm going to put the stain and the finish on before I fret. So I'll get these cleaned out, make sure there's no extra gunk in there. Because once I do the Angelus dye and the True Oil, I'm going to re-gum up those frets. So I've got a 1/8 chisel here, and we're just going to chisel out the nut, get the nut nice and level. So I start from the center and just slowly move back. Then I've got a StewMac file that's level, 1/8 level file, nut file I think it's called. And we'll just get this nice and flat. And then if you want to see the stain, go to the stain video here. But once the stain video is all done, we come back and we clean out those frets again. And there's a ton of gook in here. I put way too many different colors on this fretboard, and so we've got to clean this out again. So I've got a little bit of true oil, a little bit of stain, a little bit of dust. And this was a really nice tool from Stu Mac. Really helps clean out those slots again. So we'll go through and do this to every fret slot. And then we'll start fretting. So I'm using Philadelphia Luthier Supplies stainless steel frets. And we're going to glue these in. So I've got my caul. I've got a fret press arbor. I always glue these in. I've got some tight bond glue. We're going to make sure the glue is even across the fret. And I'm not going to show this whole series. I've got a whole ton of videos on me fretting. But with stainless steel frets, you're doing this the same way. Going to glue them in, press down, and I'm going to clamp the frets down. I'll do about 7 frets, and then I'll clamp them back with that 12-degree caul. That way none of them move, they're nice and even. Then I don't have to do a full refret or a fret level, I can just spot level. Since the fretboard's level, the frets go in at the same depth essentially, I can just find the spots that are not perfect and just level those out. So we'll go through glue, wipe up the glue, clean it off. And continue to do a couple more frets here. Again, some more tight bond glue, slot it in, push it down so it sits flat. Clean off the extra glue and move to the next one. This is probably one of the easier parts of fretting, is actually getting them in. It's getting the level and everything else perfect, which takes more time. So like I said, I'll let this clamp after doing about 7, and then I've got some heavy duty clips to cut the ends. Stainless steel frets are significantly harder than other frets, and I'm squeezing here to get these cut down. I did not think it would require this much effort to cut these. So then I bought some diamond levels from Amazon, and this is how we're gonna clean up the edges. I noticed when I was doing this, the files tend to jump a lot more with stainless steel frets. They're a lot harder. So I had to be pretty careful not to scratch. So I actually cut the diamond file so I could use them in my hand like this. So we just go back and forth cleaning this up. And if I scratch up the fretboard at all I do is take a little bit of stain and true oil and clean that edge up. So I'm going to spot check a couple frets here. I had about 6 frets that were high, and I realized I lost the video where I was editing the 6 down. I had 2 trouble spots, and so I'm filing down the 2 trouble spots here and getting them level. So we're just spot checking and trying to clean this up. So I'd already went over this spot twice and I recrowned it and got it level. And just a couple spots were too high still. So what we're going to do is spot check, file, spot check again, and then come back with some 600 grit. And this is before I bought my full fret eraser pack from Stu Mac. And this is 600 grit, and we're just taking off some of those scratches So I actually think on that sanding stick I had 320. I was just cleaning it up slightly. So this is a 1000 grit fret eraser, and I'm cleaning up just that final bit. So I had about 5 frets that were too high. I cleaned them up, leveled them, recrowned them, and then came back and spot checked here. Next video up in the Kevin Bond series will be the completed guitar. Thanks for watching this whole series, guys. Really fun to get this one out the door here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next vid.